When I first met Emily, I thought I'd won the lottery. She was everything I wanted: smart, funny, stunning, and the kind of person who made you feel like the most important person in the room. After 7 years of marriage, I thought we were solid. Sure, life wasn't always sunshine and roses. Who has that? But we were a team. Or so I thought. The first time I noticed something was off, it was subtle. Emily had always been private about her phone, but now it was practically glued to her hand. At dinner, while we watched TV, even in bed, her phone was her constant companion. I teased her about it at first. "Who's the lucky guy?" I joked one night as she giggled at a text. She shot me a quick smile and said, "Just work stuff, babe." I didn't think much of it then. I trusted her. I mean, why wouldn't I? Emily was my wife, my partner, the mother of our 5-year-old, Jake. But as the weeks went by, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was different. She started working late more often. She had new friends from the gym she suddenly had to grab coffee with. And the perfume, God, that perfume. Emily always smelled nice, but this was new. Expensive. A kind of smell you wear for someone you're trying to impress. When I commented on it, she brushed it off, saying a coworker had given her a sample. Maybe I would have let it go if it weren't for the silence. You know how in a marriage, even when you're not talking, there's this comfortable vibe? That disappeared. It was like she was living in her own little world, and I was on the outside, watching. It wasn't until one Sunday evening, as I was cleaning out her car, that I found the first crack in our perfect little life. There, tucked between the seat and the console, was a receipt. Dinner for 2 at an upscale Italian place downtown, on a night she told me she was at the gym. I stared at that receipt for what felt like an eternity, my mind racing. Was it a work dinner? A friend? Or was it what my gut already knew? I decided not to say anything. Not yet. If there was something to find, I needed to be sure. After that receipt, I started paying attention. Not in an obsessive, stalkerish way, at least I told myself that, but just enough to notice the cracks. It didn't take long before they became impossible to ignore. Emily's late nights became more frequent, and her excuses started to sound like bad sitcom plots. One evening, she claimed she'd stayed late to help a coworker with a project. "Who?" I asked casually. She paused just a beat too long before saying, "Oh, Katie. You don't know her." Katie? She'd never mentioned a Katie before. But I didn't press it. I just nodded and filed it away with the growing list of things that didn't add up. Then came the lingerie. A sleek, lacy black set that I found buried in the back of her drawer while putting away laundry. And no, before you asked, I hadn't seen her wear it for me. Ever. "Nice," I muttered under my breath, feeling a hot wave of anger and confusion roll over me. Was this real? Was my wife actually stepping out on me? It wasn't until I noticed her phone habits that everything really clicked. She was always on it, but her screen was angled away from me like she was shielding state secrets. And when I'd walk into the room, boom, lock screen. One night, while she was in the shower, I decided to do the thing you're never supposed to do. I looked. Her phone was face down on the nightstand, but the lock screen notifications betrayed her. "Can't stop thinking about last night. You're incredible." It was from someone named Mike. I stared at the screen, my heart racing, a million thoughts running through my head. Who was Mike? When had this started? Was it just texts, or had it gone further? The shower shut off, and I barely managed to put the phone back before Emily walked into the room, wrapped in a towel. She smiled at me, her face flushed from the heat of the water, and for a moment, I felt like I was living in some surreal alternate reality. How could she look at me like that, so normal, while her phone was buzzing with messages from another man? That night, as she drifted off to sleep beside me, I lay wide awake, staring at the ceiling. This wasn't just paranoia anymore. This was real. Alright, so the next day, I couldn't sit on this anymore. My brain was doing cartwheels, and I felt like I was going to explode. I decided I needed proof. Real proof. The kind that doesn't let her weasel her way out with some half-baked excuse. So, I did what any desperate husband with a touch of tech savvy and a sprinkle of insanity would do. I downloaded software to mirror her phone. Don't judge me. At that point, my gut was screaming louder than my moral compass. The first night I activated it, my hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped my own phone. I couldn't believe what I was doing, but the moment those messages started coming in, boom, my world imploded. Mike wasn't just some rando. He was her co-worker. The married co-worker. They weren't just flirting, they had an entire secret relationship, complete with pet names and plans to meet at some cheap motel across town the next day. Mike, can't wait to see you tomorrow, Em. I'll bring the wine if you bring that black thing I love so much, winky face. Emily, you're bad, lol. But I like it. Can't wait either. I'll think of an excuse to slip out early. I had to read that exchange about 5 times before it really sank in. My wife, the woman I'd built a life with, was sneaking off to get banged by Mike from accounting or sales or whatever the hell he did. The anger was volcanic. I wanted to confront her right then and there, to scream, to throw my phone across the room. But then I had an even better idea. I'd follow her. The next day, Emily was as chipper as ever. She kissed me on the cheek before heading out, saying something about a client lunch. The audacity of this woman. I waited about 15 minutes before grabbing my keys and heading out after her. It wasn't hard to keep up. She drove like a grandma. Sure enough, she pulled into a dingy motel parking lot on the outskirts of town. My stomach turned as I watched her get out of the car, smoothing down her blouse and flipping her hair like she was some kind of femme fatale in a B movie. And then I saw him. Mike. Tall, cocky, and looking every bit the douchebag I had imagined. He walked up, grabbed her ass like they were in a damn rom-com, and they disappeared into room 214. I sat there in my car, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Part of me wanted to storm in there and rip the door off the hinges, but another part of me, probably the saner part, wanted to collect myself and figure out my next move. And that's when the plans started to form. I drove back home that day with my mind spinning at 1,000 miles per hour. I knew I couldn't just sit on this and let it fester. Emily and Mike thought they were playing me, but I was about to flip the entire script. Step 1. Gather evidence. I spent the next week building a dossier that would make the FBI proud. I snapped photos of her car at the motel, grabbed screenshots of their messages, complete with timestamps, and even found a way to download the hotel receipts from her email. I had everything, the who, the when, the where. But that wasn't enough for me. Oh no. I wasn't just going to confront her. I wanted her to feel the weight of her betrayal. Step 2. Loop in an ally. I reached out to Mike's wife. Let's call her Jessica. I found her on Facebook. Classic soccer mom vibes, sweet and unsuspecting. At first I hesitated. I mean, this would wreck her life too. But then I thought, why the hell should I protect them when they didn't care about protecting us? I sent her a polite message. Me. Hi Jessica, I'm really sorry to bother you, but I think we need to talk. It's about your husband, Mike, and my wife, Emily. She responded within minutes. Jessica. What do you mean? It didn't take long to get her up to speed. I sent her screenshots of the texts, the motel photos, everything. At first, she didn't believe me, but the evidence was undeniable. Her initial shock quickly turned into fury. They've been doing this for how long? She texted, followed by a string of expletives I didn't know existed. Jessica was all in. We decided to coordinate our revenge, and let me tell you, it felt damn good to have someone on my side. Step 3. The ambush. Jessica and I planned it for a Friday. She'd confront Mike while I dealt with Emily. The goal was simple, maximum impact, no escape routes. That day, Emily came home from work, looking smug and unsuspecting. I had dinner waiting, her favorite, spaghetti carbonara. I wanted everything to feel normal. Wow, this looks amazing. she said, flashing me her practiced smile. What's the occasion? Oh, nothing special, I replied, keeping my tone light. Just thought we could have a nice dinner. You know, talk about our week. She sat down, completely oblivious to the storm brewing. As she twirled a forkful of pasta, I slid my phone across the table. The screen lit up with a collage of her texts with Mike, photos of her car at the motel, and a time-stamped receipt. What's this? She asked, frowning as she picked up the phone. I didn't say a word. I just watched as her face went pale, her fork clattering onto the plate. Where did you get this? She whispered, her voice trembling. Oh, I've got more, I said, my tone icy. This is just the appetizer. Her eyes darted around, looking for an escape. But there was none. Jake's at my parents' for the weekend, I continued, leaning back in my chair. So, no need to worry about him overhearing this little chat. Now tell me, Emily, how long have you been screwing Mike? She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. The guilt was written all over her face, and for once, she couldn't lie her way out of it. Emily sat there, frozen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Finally, she stammered. It's not what it looks like. I laughed, loud and bitter. Oh, it's exactly what it looks like, Emily. I have texts. I have photos. I have receipts from the motel. So, why don't you cut the bullshit and start talking? Her eyes filled with tears, but I wasn't buying it. Not this time. I didn't mean for it to happen, she whispered. It just got out of hand. Out of hand? I repeated, my voice rising. That's how you describe screwing a married coworker for months? Out of hand? She buried her face in her hands, sobbing, but I didn't care. Do you even realize what you've done? To me? To Jake? Hell, even to Mike's wife? At the mention of Jessica, Emily's head snapped up. You told her? She asked, her voice sharp with panic. Oh, you bet I did, I shot back. And guess what? She's confronting Mike right now. So, while you're sitting here trying to spin your pathetic excuses, he's getting the exact same treatment. Emily's face crumpled, and she let out a wail that sounded more like frustration than remorse. I don't know what you want me to say, she said finally. I made a mistake. I'm sorry, okay? I've been stressed, and you're always busy with work. I needed someone to talk to. Talk? I scoffed. Oh, sure. You and Mike must have had some really deep conversations at that motel. Tell me, Emily, did he give you advice on what lingerie to wear next time? She flinched like I'd slapped her, but I didn't care. I wasn't done. I trusted you, Emily. I loved you. And you threw it all away for, what? A thrill? A little excitement? I didn't mean to hurt you. She sobbed, tears streaming down her face. It just happened. I wasn't thinking. Well, guess what? I said, leaning forward. I am thinking. And you're going to face the consequences. Before she could respond, my phone buzzed. It was Jessica. Jessica. It's done. He's out of the house. I told him to pack his shit and leave. Thanks for the evidence. It helped a lot. I smirked, showing the message to Emily. Looks like your boy Mike is having a rough night too. Her face twisted in despair. Please, we can work through this. For Jake. For our family. I shook my head, my heart heavy but resolute. You should have thought about our family before you started sneaking around, Emily. This marriage? It's done. Emily's sobs filled the kitchen, but I wasn't moved. She looked so small, so broken, but all I could feel was the rage and betrayal bubbling inside me. Every time she opened her mouth, it felt like another excuse was coming, another attempt to wiggle out of the mess she'd made. Please, she choked out. We can fix this. I'll do anything. I stared at her for a long moment, letting the silence stretch. Anything? I asked finally. She nodded desperately, like a drowning person clinging to a life raft. Yes, anything. All right, I said, leaning back in my chair. Here's what you're going to do. Tomorrow morning, you're going to pack a bag and leave. Go to your sister's, your friends, a damn hotel for all I care. But you're not staying here. Her face fell, the desperation turning to panic. What about Jake? He needs me. Oh, don't you dare pull the Mother of the Year card now. I snapped. Jake deserves better than this. Better than you sneaking around with some loser and tearing our family apart. She flinched, her tears coming harder now. I can't leave him, she whispered. He's my son, and you'll still be his mom, I said coldly. But right now I need space, and you need to think long and hard about what you've done. Before she could argue, I stood up and walked out of the kitchen, slamming the door behind me. My heart was pounding, my mind racing. Part of me wanted to throw her out that very second, but I knew Jake deserved a calm transition. I couldn't let this mess affect him any more than it already had. I stayed up late that night, scrolling through photos on my phone, Jake's first steps, family vacations, Christmas mornings. All the memories that now felt tainted by Emily's betrayal. How long had this been going on? Was it happening during those moments too? Around midnight, my phone buzzed again. It was Jessica. Jessica. I still can't believe it. Mike admitted everything. Said it started 6 months ago. 6 months. How did we not see it? Me. Because we trusted them. That's what good people do. Jessica. Well, not anymore. I'm filing for divorce. What about you? Me. I'm done. This marriage is over. Jessica. Good. They don't deserve us. Her words hit harder than I expected. They don't deserve us. She was right. Emily and Mike had made their choices, and now they were going to live with them. The next morning, Emily was quiet. She didn't argue, didn't fight. She just packed a bag and kissed Jake goodbye, her face pale and tear-streaked. I told her I'd explain it to him later, that she could call him, but she needed to leave. As she walked out the door, I felt a strange mix of emotions, relief, sadness, anger. Part of me still loved her, still wanted to fix things. But the damage was too deep. Trust once shattered is damn near impossible to rebuild. I watched her drive away, wondering how we had ended up here. The day Emily left, the house felt hollow, like someone had sucked all the life out of it. Jake kept asking why Mommy wasn't there to make pancakes like she always did on Saturdays. I mumbled something about her visiting Aunt Lisa and distracted him with cartoons. But I knew I couldn't dodge the question forever. For now, I buried myself in cleaning. Anything to keep my mind off the gaping hole Emily had left behind. As I scrubbed the countertops and vacuumed the living room, I noticed things I hadn't paid attention to before. Her perfume bottle on the dresser, her favorite mug still in the sink. Little reminders of a life we'd shared, now fractured beyond repair. But just as I was starting to wrap my head around my new reality, Jessica called. Her voice was sharp, laced with anger and a touch of disbelief. Mike just showed up at the house, she said. He's begging me to take him back. What did you say? I asked, already knowing the answer. What do you think? I told him to pack his crap and leave. But get this, he let it slip that Emily's been feeding him this sob story about how you're some cold, workaholic husband who never paid her any attention. Like she's the victim in all this. I clenched the phone, my knuckles white. Of course she is, I said bitterly. They're not just cheaters, they're delusional. Jessica let out a bitter laugh. Oh, it gets better. Apparently, Mike didn't know you knew about everything until I told him. He thought Emily had it all under control. You should have seen his face when I threw those texts in his smug face. Priceless. Hearing that gave me a small flicker of satisfaction. At least Mike was getting a taste of the chaos he helped create. But then Jessica's tone shifted. Listen, I know we're both dealing with a lot, but I think we need to figure out what happens next. Not just for us, but for them. What do you mean? I mean they can't get away with this, she said, her voice firm. Not without consequences. She was right. Emily and Mike had wrecked two families without a second thought, and while I wasn't one for revenge, I couldn't shake the feeling that they needed to be held accountable. That's when Jessica dropped the bombshell. I have an idea, she said. It's petty, but they deserve it. When Jessica said she had an idea, I wasn't sure if I was ready to hear it. But then again, after everything Emily and Mike had done, I figured, why not? All right, I said. Hit me with it. Her voice took on this devious edge, like she'd been holding on to this plan for a while. So, you know how Mike and Emily think they're so clever, right? Sneaking around, lying to us, playing the victims? I say we take their little fantasy and blow it to pieces. I raised an eyebrow, even though she couldn't see it. Go on. Jessica explained her plan, and honestly, it was brilliant. A little vindictive, sure, but they'd earned it. The idea was simple: expose them in the most public way possible. And not just to friends and family. We were talking full-scale humiliation. Step 1? Use social media. Jessica had been scrolling through Mike's Facebook and noticed he'd posted a bunch of pictures of their perfect family. You know the type: beaming smiles, matching Christmas sweaters, captions about how blessed he was. She suggested uploading screenshots of the affair texts with a caption like, "Here's what the guy behind these photos is really up to." And Emily? I asked, already feeling a dark sense of satisfaction creeping in. Jessica didn't miss a beat. We do the same thing. Let the world know what she's been up to while playing the loving wife and doting mom. Part of me hesitated. This wasn't just exposing their affair, it was nuking their reputations. But then I thought about everything they'd done. The lies. The betrayal. The audacity to pretend like they were justified. Let's do it, I said. The next morning, Jessica and I got to work. We compiled everything: the texts, the motel receipts, even photos of Mike and Emily together. Then, with shaky fingers and adrenaline pumping, we hit post. Jessica's caption was brutal. Behind the scenes of Mike's blessed family life. Turns out he's been screwing my friend's wife while lying to me and our kids. Hope it was worth it, Mike. Mine wasn't much kinder. Meet Emily, my loving wife of 7 years and mother of our son. She's been sneaking around with her married coworker for months while lying to our faces. I hope you and Mike are happy together, Em. You deserve each other. The posts went live, and we waited. It didn't take long for the fallout to begin. Comments started flooding in within minutes. Friends, coworkers, even distant relatives chimed in, shocked and horrified. Oh my God, I can't believe this. Emily? No way. She seemed so sweet. Mike is such a piece of garbage. You deserve better, Jessica. By noon, the posts had gone viral in our circles. People were sharing them, tagging others, and gossiping like wildfire. Emily's sister called me, demanding to know if it was true. Mike's boss apparently saw the post and called him into the office for talk. But the real kicker? Emily and Mike both saw the post at the same time. My phone blew up with calls and texts from Emily. She was alternating between begging me to delete the post and screaming about how I'd ruined her life. Emily, how could you do this? You're making it impossible for me to even go to work. Me. Oh, sorry, was I supposed to keep your affair a secret? My bad. Jessica texted me later that night, gleefully recounting how Mike had come home furious, yelling about how she'd destroyed his career. She just smiled sweetly and said, "Should have thought about that before you destroyed our marriage." For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than anger or sadness. I felt vindicated. The chaos from the posts was a wildfire that no one could contain. My phone didn't stop buzzing for 2 days straight. Friends, family, coworkers, hell, even people I barely knew, were reaching out with some mix of shock, pity, or awkward attempts at support. But the real entertainment? Watching Emily and Mike scramble to pick up the pieces. Mike's wife, Jessica, gave me the blow-by-blow of his meltdown. Apparently, his boss wasn't too pleased to find out that one of their senior managers had been sleeping with a married coworker and using company time to do it. By the end of the week, Mike was let go for violating workplace policies. Jessica sent me a screenshot of his text. Mike, I can't believe you let this blow up like this. Do you have any idea what you've done? I've lost everything. Jessica, you mean like how I lost my husband and my dignity because you're a cheating piece of trash? Cry me a river. Emily, meanwhile, wasn't faring much better. She showed up at my door 2 days after the post went live, looking like a train wreck. Her hair was a mess, her eyes were bloodshot, and she was clutching a tote bag like her life depended on it. Can we talk? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I folded my arms, leaning against the doorframe. What's there to talk about, Emily? Everyone already knows the truth. She winced like I'd slapped her. Please, she begged. I'm sorry. I didn't think it would get this bad. This bad? I repeated, my voice rising. You're sorry it got this bad? Not sorry for betraying me? Not sorry for blowing up our marriage or screwing over your son? Just sorry you got caught? She started crying again, but this time, I wasn't moved. Jake is going to hear about this one day, I said, my tone cold. Do you have any idea what you've done to him? I'll do anything to make it right. She sobbed. I laughed bitterly. The only thing you can do is stay away until I figure out how to tell our son that his mom is a liar and a cheater. She didn't fight me after that. She just nodded, turned, and walked back to her car. Meanwhile, the social media fallout kept snowballing. Jessica and I got messages from mutual friends who'd completely cut ties with Mike and Emily. Some of them sent us receipts of their own. Apparently, Mike had a history of flirting with women in the office. And Emily? Well, let's just say this wasn't her first work husband. By the end of the week, Emily had deactivated her social media accounts, and Mike was rumored to be crashing at some friend's basement. Jessica and I stayed in touch, not because we were particularly close, but because it felt like we were riding the same insane roller coaster. You think they'll try to spin it? I asked her one night over text. Her reply came instantly. Jessica, let them try. We've got the receipts. They're done. She was right. The more they tried to defend themselves, the worse they looked. People don't take kindly to cheaters trying to play the victim. The dust was starting to settle, or so I thought. Emily stopped trying to call me after our last conversation, which was both a relief and unsettling. I didn't trust her silence. Meanwhile, Jake was starting to notice that something was off. Where's Mommy? He asked one night while I was tucking him in. She's staying with Aunt Lisa for a while, I said, keeping my voice calm. She just needs some time. Jake nodded, but I could see the confusion in his little eyes. He didn't press further, thank God, but the guilt gnawed at me. He deserved a better answer. He deserved better parents. The next morning, I got a call from my lawyer. I'd started the process of filing for divorce, and I wanted it to be clean and quick. I was done with Emily, and the sooner I could untangle myself from her mess, the better. But of course, Emily wasn't going to make it that easy. That afternoon, I got an email from her lawyer. It was a laundry list of demands. Half of everything, including the house. Primary custody of Jake. Spousal support because, apparently, she felt emotionally distraught after the public fallout. I stared at the email, laughing in disbelief. Emotionally distraught? Oh, honey, that's rich. I immediately called my lawyer. Can you believe this crap? I said, reading the email aloud. She's trying to play hardball, he said. But don't worry. We've got more leverage than she does. All that evidence you collected? It's a goldmine. The courts don't look kindly on infidelity, especially when there's a child involved. Hearing that was the first real sense of relief I'd felt in weeks. Emily thought she could waltz out of this mess with a free ride, but she had no idea what was coming. Jessica called me that night with her own update. Apparently, Mike had tried to reconcile with her after losing his job. He showed up at the house with flowers, she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Like that was going to erase everything. What did you do? I asked, already grinning. Told him to shove the flowers where the sun doesn't shine and handed him the divorce papers, she replied. His face was priceless. We both laughed, but there was a heaviness to it. Jessica and I were winning, sure, but it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like survival. A few days later, Emily finally broke her silence. She showed up at the house unannounced, her face pale and drawn. I just want to talk, she said, standing on the porch like a stray dog. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. What's there to talk about, Emily? You've got a lawyer now. Save it for the courtroom. Her lip quivered, but I didn't feel an ounce of sympathy. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she said. I don't want to fight with you. I just want to see Jake. Then why are you demanding full custody? I shot back. If you really cared about him, you'd stop trying to use him as a bargaining chip. Her face twisted with anger. I'm his mother. He needs me. And I'm his father, I said, my voice steady. But unlike you, I'm not the one who blew up his family for some sleazy fling. So if you want to see Jake, you'll do it on my terms. She didn't have a response to that. She just stared at me for a long moment before turning and walking back to her car. The days after Emily's visit were oddly quiet. I thought maybe she'd finally come to terms with the situation and was willing to let the courts handle everything. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. But oh no. Emily wasn't done. It started with little things, subtle jabs from mutual friends who still hadn't picked a side. You know, Emily's really struggling, one of them told me over coffee. She says you've been stonewalling her. Stonewalling? I repeated, incredulous. She cheated, blew up our marriage, and now I'm supposed to roll out the red carpet for her? They shrugged, clearly uncomfortable. I'm just saying maybe you should hear her out. For Jake's sake. I brushed it off, but the comments kept coming. Then, a week later, I got a letter in the mail. It was from Emily's lawyer. She wasn't just demanding custody now, she was filing for a temporary restraining order. Against me. The claim? That I was hostile, emotionally unstable, and creating an unsafe environment for Jake. I nearly threw the letter across the room. Hostile? Unsafe? I'd been bending over backward to keep things calm for Jake while she was out gallivanting with Mike. I called my lawyer immediately. What the hell is this? I fumed, pacing the kitchen as I read through the document again. She's trying to paint herself as the victim, he said. It's a common tactic in cases like this, especially when there's a lot of public backlash. She's hoping to gain sympathy and leverage in court. Well, it's not going to work, I snapped. We have evidence. We have witnesses. She's the one who created this mess. And the court will see that, he assured me. But you'll need to keep your cool. If she's accusing you of being unstable, the worst thing you can do is prove her right. That night, as I sat in the living room, staring at the legal papers, I felt a deep, burning anger. Emily was willing to stoop this low, to drag Jake and me through the mud, just to save face. I thought about Jake upstairs, peacefully asleep, completely unaware of the war being waged over him. He was the only reason I hadn't lost it completely. All right, Emily, I muttered to myself. You want to play dirty? Let's play. The next morning, I called Jessica. She filed a restraining order? She asked, her voice sharp with disbelief. Yep, I said, rubbing my temples. Apparently, I'm a hostile presence now. Jessica laughed bitterly. She's really doubling down, huh? You know, I hate to say it, but Mike tried pulling the same crap with me. Said I was irrational and vindictive. Sounds like they've been comparing notes. I muttered. Well, if she wants to escalate, we escalate, Jessica said. What's your next move? I smiled grimly. I've been holding back. But not anymore. If Emily thought I was going to sit back and let her smear my name, she had another thing coming. This wasn't just about my pride anymore. It was about protecting Jake and making sure the truth came out. The first thing I did was call my lawyer and give him the green light to go full throttle. "Bring out everything we've got," I said. "The texts, the emails, the motel receipts. Leave no stone unturned." "Got it," he said. "We'll make sure the court sees exactly who's been creating the instability here." The second thing I did was hire a private investigator. I wanted to make sure there wasn't anything else Emily was hiding, other affairs, shady financial moves, whatever. If she was going to try and paint me as the bad guy, I needed to be 10 steps ahead. Within a week, the PI came back with a goldmine. Not only had Emily been using our joint account to fund her little rendezvous with Mike, but she'd also been lying about her work hours for months. She was clocking in late, leaving early, and fabricating client meetings to cover her tracks. But the cherry on top? The PI found out that Mike wasn't the only guy she'd been seeing. There was a second man, some fitness trainer she'd been meeting at the gym. I couldn't believe it. While I'd been breaking my back to keep our family together, she'd been out living some trashy soap opera. The day of the custody hearing finally arrived. I walked into the courthouse feeling nervous but prepared. My lawyer had organized everything into a clear, damning narrative: Emily's affair with Mike, her misuse of our finances, her neglectful behavior as a parent, and now, her attempts to weaponize the legal system against me. Emily, on the other hand, looked frazzled. Her lawyer was whispering furiously in her ear, and I could tell they knew they were about to get steamrolled. When it was my turn to speak, I kept my voice calm and steady. "I'm not here to drag Emily's name through the mud," I began. "I just want what's best for our son. But the facts are clear. Emily's actions have shown a consistent pattern of dishonesty and irresponsibility. I've been the one providing stability for Jake, and I'll continue to do so." Then we laid out the evidence. The judge's expression shifted as each piece was presented: the texts, the financial records, the PI's report. By the time my lawyer wrapped up, Emily was visibly shaking. When it was her turn, she tried to play the victim. "I made mistakes," she said, her voice trembling. "But I'm still a good mother. Jake needs me in his life." Her lawyer leaned heavily on the restraining order, painting me as an unstable and angry husband. But when the judge asked for proof, all they had were vague claims and no evidence. It was a slaughter. By the end of the hearing, the judge granted me primary custody of Jake. Emily was allowed supervised visitation until she could demonstrate that she'd gotten her act together. As for the restraining order? Denied. When the ruling was announced, I felt a weight lift off my chest. Emily stormed out of the courtroom without looking at me, but I didn't care. I wasn't there for her. I was there for Jake. Jessica called me that night, laughing hysterically when I told her what had happened. "Looks like Emily and Mike both got what they deserved," she said. "Maybe now they'll realize they're not untouchable." "Doubt it," I replied. "But at least they're not our problem anymore." After the custody hearing, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief, but it was bittersweet. Sure, I'd won, but winning still meant dealing with the aftermath of Emily's betrayal and the mess she'd left behind. Jake was my main focus. I sat him down that weekend and explained everything in the simplest, most kid-friendly terms I could manage. "Mommy and Daddy aren't going to live together anymore," I said gently, holding his tiny hand. "But that doesn't change how much we love you. You're the most important thing to both of us." He looked at me with those big, innocent eyes and asked, "Did I do something wrong?" I nearly broke. "No, buddy. This isn't your fault. Not even a little bit. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, and they have to figure out how to fix them." He nodded slowly, still processing, and then hugged me so tight I thought my heart would burst. "I love you, Daddy." That one moment gave me more clarity than any courtroom win ever could. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about building a new, better life for Jake and me. Emily tried to reach out a few times after the hearing. At first, it was to talk about Jake, but her messages quickly turned into thinly veiled attempts to guilt-trip me. "Emily, I can't believe you turned him against me. He doesn't even want to talk to me now. Me. I didn't turn him against you. He's 5, Emily. He's confused. Maybe instead of blaming me, you should focus on repairing your relationship with him. She didn't respond after that. Mike, on the other hand, was a ghost. Jessica told me he'd packed up and moved out of state, probably hoping to start fresh somewhere no one knew what a scumbag he was. Good riddance, Jessica said when we talked. The only thing I regret is not seeing the look on his face when the judge ruled against him. I laughed. We should have recorded it. Would have gone viral in seconds. Over the next few weeks, life started to feel normal again. Well, a new kind of normal. Jake and I fell into a routine: school drop-offs, soccer practice, movie nights. I even started picking up some hobbies I'd neglected for years. But the loneliness crept in during the quiet moments. It's hard to adjust to a life without the person you thought you'd spend forever with, even when they turn out to be someone you barely recognize. Jessica and I stayed in touch, though. We'd check in on each other, trade updates, and sometimes just vent about how surreal it all still felt. You ever think about dating again? She asked me one night during a call. Ha! Can't even imagine, I said. What about you? She snorted. Not unless it's with someone who comes with a notarized letter of loyalty. But honestly, I'm good on my own for now. Same, I said. As the weeks turned into months, I started to find my footing again. It wasn't easy. There were nights when I'd lie awake, replaying everything in my head, wondering how it all went so wrong. But every morning, Jake gave me a reason to keep moving forward. We started creating new traditions: pancake Sundays, movie marathons, camping in the backyard. It wasn't the life I'd imagined, but it was ours, and that made it special. Emily, to her credit, seemed to take the court ruling seriously. She showed up for her supervised visits on time, and while Jake was still hesitant around her at first, they were slowly rebuilding their bond. I kept my distance, only communicating with her through the court-appointed mediator. The bitterness I'd felt toward her began to fade, not entirely, but enough that I didn't feel consumed by it anymore. She was a part of Jake's life, and for his sake, I had to learn how to coexist with her. One day, while I was cleaning out the garage, I stumbled across a box of old photos. They were from the early days of my relationship with Emily: smiling selfies, vacation snapshots, goofy candids. For a moment, I felt a pang of sadness. We'd been happy once. We'd built a life together, created a family. And while she destroyed that life, those memories were still real. I thought about throwing the box away, but something stopped me. Instead, I tucked it back on the shelf. Not for me, but for Jake. Maybe one day, he'd want to see those photos and understand where he came from. Jessica and I met up a few weeks later for coffee. She looked good, stronger, more confident. Mike's trying to contact me again, she said, rolling her eyes. He wants to apologize and talk things through. And? I asked, sipping my latte. And I blocked his number. Dude can go talk to a brick wall for all I care. I laughed, genuinely happy for her. Good for you. You deserve better. Thanks, she said, smiling. So do you, by the way. We chatted for a while longer, swapping updates on our lives. By the time we parted ways, I felt a sense of closure I hadn't realized I needed. Life wasn't perfect, but it was moving forward. I started taking Jake to therapy, just to make sure he had the tools to process everything. He was a resilient kid, and every day, he amazed me with his strength. As for me, I wasn't in any rush to start dating again, but I wasn't closed off to the idea either. I'd learned a lot from this experience, about trust, about resilience, about what I wanted in a partner. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to face it. It's strange to look back on everything that happened and realize how far I've come. When I first discovered Emily's betrayal, I thought my world was ending. I couldn't see past the hurt, the anger, the overwhelming sense of failure. But now, I'm still standing. Stronger, smarter, and dare I say, happier. Jake is thriving. He's adjusted to our new routine, and while he still has questions sometimes, he's surrounded by love and stability. Watching him grow has been my greatest source of strength. He reminds me every day that life is still full of joy, even when things don't go as planned. Emily and I remain civil, for Jake's sake. We don't exchange pleasantries or try to fake a friendship, but we've found a rhythm that works. She's still figuring out her own life, and honestly, that's not my problem anymore. As for Mike, he's a ghost. Last I heard, he was working some dead-end job in a new city, trying to piece his life back together. Jessica has moved on, too. She's working on herself, focusing on her kids, and living her best life without the weight of Mike dragging her down. I've learned a lot through all of this. About people. About resilience. About myself. The most important lesson? You can't control what others do, but you can control how you respond. I used to think Emily's betrayal would define me, that it would leave a permanent scar on my life. But now, I see it as a turning point. It forced me to reevaluate my priorities, to rebuild from the ground up, to rediscover what really matters. If there's one piece of advice I'd give to anyone going through something similar, it's this: don't let the pain consume you. Feel it, process it, and then let it go. Use it as fuel to build something better. I'm not the same person I was before all of this, and that's okay. Life isn't about staying the same, it's about growing, adapting, and finding strength in the chaos. So here I am. A single dad, a little bruised but not broken, ready to face whatever comes next. Because if I've learned one thing, it's that no matter how dark things get, there's always a way forward. Thanks for sticking with me through this wild ride. If my story helps even one person feel a little less alone, then it was worth sharing. Keep your head up, friends. Life has a funny way of surprising you when you least expect it.